Hi, I'm Ian Bush. I'm the founder of Artist Guitars. So I first started in the music industry in the early 90s, and my first job was to repair amplifiers and do general repairs, amps, guitars, that sort of thing. And I started as a trainee, and I did that because I wanted to get into the music industry because I really loved it. And I wanted to be a musician, but I didn't think I was good enough to be a professional musician. And being a professional musician is a pretty tough life. So I decided to get a job. Then a couple of years in, I started to become a product manager in the same company doing different brands. So product manager is the guy that decides the range and the purchasing and handles any of the product questions, that sort of thing. With part of being the product manager, that's when I first started to visit factories. And starting in the US and Japan. So the total factories that I've seen in my life, I couldn't tell you because there's so many. It would be over hundreds, 400 to 500. Because on some trips, when we go to visit factories, we might see 3 factories in one day. And some factories we see multiple times. But other factories, we might only see them once and just decide, oh, this isn't the right factory for us. So over my whole life, it's hundreds of factories that I've seen. So I've seen them in America, Japan, but mainly, obviously, a lot of factories in China. In the early 2000s, I went to live in China for 3 years. And I did that because the company I was working with, we did a joint venture. At that point, I'd already been traveling to China for about 5 years. And then spent 3 years living there, and since that time, taken hundreds of trips there. So the inspiration from Artist Guitars actually happened from when I was much younger. So when I first started to play guitar, when I was just a little kid, I couldn't afford good guitars. And I always felt like, oh, how can I afford to get the right sort of gear? How can I get a decent amp or decent effects and a decent guitar, but I couldn't afford it. And so it's kind of always stuck with me of how do you make things more affordable. So the best way to describe Artist Guitars is unbeatable value. Everything we try to do is how do we get the best value for money? Not necessarily the cheapest, but the best value. And we always try and put as much value as we can into every product that we make. And that's something that's pretty hard to do sometimes, but we really want to focus on value and quality, but definitely something that's affordable. When we first started, it just was in the garage. I was in a share house and I got 48 guitars delivered to me from overseas. And I used to count them just to make sure they were still there. So back in 2009, websites were a lot harder to make. You couldn't just, there was no Shopify or anything like that. So I was just selling them on eBay, and eBay was a relatively new thing at that time. I had people turn up to the house and check out the guitars, and quite quickly those guitars sold out. So then we bought another container of stock, and I had to find somewhere to store it. So I hired a storage unit in one of the self-storage areas. So since moving out of the storage unit, we moved to our first warehouse in Canal Road, St. Peter's, which was just a little one. It was about 250 square meters, and that was quite big at the time. And we added our first full-time employee, which was a milestone, which is quite hard for anybody who's ever done that. And since then, we've moved to 2 more warehouses, the second one at St. Peter's. We've now moved to our 5th location at Yunora, which is a nice big warehouse and everything's really neatly laid out. So a couple of the times along the way where I've noticed that things have changed was, one of them was just really simple. When we did our first 1,000 orders on eBay, all of a sudden things started to accelerate. Maybe because you're looking at the feedback and going, oh, if they've got 1,000 feedback, they must be pretty good. And things started to really take off from there. I think up until that point, we didn't have any employees, and it was still pretty touch and go whether we could make it into a business. But after 1,000 eBay orders, I could definitely feel it started to accelerate from there. And a little bit later on from that, I remember being in the storage unit and having like a lineup of people in the storage unit waiting to buy guitars or amps or stands, and thinking, oh, this is a bit weird. There's a line of people in a storage unit, and the manager of the storage unit's looking at us going, what's going on here? That's a bit weird. All these people lining up to buy stuff. So yeah, we had a huge line of people, many days, like for hours at a time, just lining up to buy stuff. No showroom, no till. Just basically we'd give them a box and take their money. So from the very beginnings, when we had no staff, we now have about 20 people in our staff. Around 2015, which is 10 years ago now, we decided to try and send some products to New Zealand. It was pretty slow going at first. We used to do where we would just send them orders basically by air freight, and we could send 20 or 30 orders a week, and the customer would get them in 1 to 2 weeks later. With New Zealand, it was quite slow to begin with, but we found over the last few years particularly that in New Zealand we're quite trusted and everybody knows who we are now. So the Artist Guitars community has really grown over the years. In the beginning, we'd have people that would come into the shop and a lot of regulars that would know me and just come in for a chat. But now we've got thousands of people in our Facebook group, and they're giving us almost daily suggestions about things we can change. And after just doing the recent Melbourne Guitar Show, there's a lot of people that have really attached themselves to the brand and really interested in what we do and really looking forward to what we do next. So it's really interesting to see how that's grown over those years. So I think the fan favourite guitar at the moment is the AT53. It's just really good value for money. It's got sort of almost every pro spec you could think of. I probably never could have dreamed of being able to make guitars at that level for our brand, so that's quite satisfying to be able to make something that good. My personal favourite guitar is the GG1. I'm more interested in acoustic guitars. I'd probably play acoustic guitar more than electric, maybe 2 to 1. I've known Gerard Gillet in passing for probably 20 years or more, from the early days when he was visiting Vietnam and setting up guitar factories there. We'd sort of be in similar circles. Playing one of the guitars that he's designed is, if you play it, you'll understand, it sounds really great. So some of the things that makes us unique is that we work really closely with the factory. So if our customers are telling us something should change, you need a different pickup, different hardware, we can make that change really easily. When you're working with international brands, say the big brand names, they pretty much don't listen to what the Australian market would tell them. The Australian market's only small, it's not big in worldwide terms. So they don't listen to that customer base. But if we're dealing with a factory directly, we can make those changes that our customers want, which is, I think that's really useful. I think it can be easy to be isolated from your customers, and then you don't really know what your customer wants, and maybe the result isn't as good as it could be. Also, we QC every guitar that we make, and we have 2 full-time QC in China that have been helping us and working with us as our staff for over 10 years. What they pick up on and fix definitely makes the result better. So we're one of the only brands that does every guitar QC'd at the factory. We deal with about 20 main factories, but we're also dealing with the sub-factories. So for example, in our guitars, we'll be dealing with the factory that makes the pickups and saying, oh, we want you to change this, or we want to go to a 4-wire design so we can do split coils, or we want to change the polarity of the magnets because we wanted humbucking in this mode or that mode. The hardware suppliers, the wood suppliers, trying to find the right combination of parts for the guitars and changing things that we need to change. We also have what I hope is the best customer service of any brand in the music industry, And I would think even any brand in e-commerce. So we've got really great support, and we really try and go out of our way to help customer problems and always try and do what we can to resolve customer issues. So I just want to thank all our customers for supporting us. Without our customers, we don't have a business. And in the future, we're going to bring out more interesting models and keep doing things that we find interesting and that our customers want. So there's more reasons to play music, because I'm sure everybody can agree that the enjoyment out of playing music is really worth it. We really appreciate all the support.